Good evening. My name is Margaret Bile, and I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Federated Women's Institutes of Canada, FWI Canada, to a roundtable discussion. In recognition of Earth Day on Friday, April 22nd, we chose to have climate change for the topic of discussion tonight. I'd also like to acknowledge that we have a number of members from the ACWW here tonight. Marie Kenny, past president, is the UN committee chair. Sheila Needham is here too. Sheila, I know that you're on membership, is it?
Communication and marketing.
Yes, communications and marketing. Thank you, Mark. Nice to see everybody. I'm eating supper, so yeah. I won't put you through that.
That's okay. And Christine Rayburn is here, and she is the ACWW secretary. And if I've missed anybody else from ACWW or past presidents, I haven't been watching everybody come in. So welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you. Climate change has affected our nation from coast to coast to coast. Tonight, we will share perspectives from east to west and beyond. And we will begin with a land acknowledgement recited by Judy Page Jones, followed by a presentation from Elizabeth Young from Newfoundland and Labrador. And the effects of the climate change and plans from several provinces will follow. So Judy, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. Before we begin this evening's program, we'd like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we meet tonight on a virtual platform, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands and to give gratitude for the sharing of these lands which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improve our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, Wabanaki, and First Nations people that call this land their home.
Elizabeth, if you'd like to begin.
Okay, thank you. The Energy Efficiency Program of Newfoundland and Labrador has implemented a series of programs which provide financial assistance to homeowners looking to reduce their energy cost and improve their comfort in their homes. These programs complement those being implemented throughout the lower carbon energy leadership funds. The Home Energy Savings Program in the province, initiated to design for low-income homeowners to make energy efficient and improving their homes and their livelihoods. It is delivered in Newfoundland and Labrador by the Newfoundland and Labrador Housing Cooperation, with programs providing non-repayable grants for up to $5,000 to assist those who are eligible for this funding. Homeowners with a household income of less than $32,500 are eligible for this funding. Also, the federal Low Carbon Economic Leadership Fund and the province have expanded the program so that it includes people who are reliant on fuel oil for their home heating, as well as electricity, propane, and wood biomass. The Atlantic Climate Adaptation Solutions Associated and the Regional Adaptations for the Collaboration in Canada. As the Atlantic Canada, we are very vulnerable to climate change, warmer temperatures, rising seas, more precipitation, and more frequent and intense storms that prevent many challenges for Newfoundland and Labrador communities. Tools and resources are needed to help these communities make a difference that minimize their risk of climate change. The government has partnered with the Regional Adapt Coalition and the Government of Canada to implement programs to administer throughout Atlantic Climate Adaptation Solutions Association and work with the development tools of the resources that help to make decision makers address the issues like coastal erosion, coastal and inland flooding, infrastructure design, and groundwater management. The program continues funding and support from the Natural Resources of Canada and the Atlantic provinces to build the adaptation capacity. The flooding risk for mapping. The mapping of Newfoundland has been done over the past while. Flooding risk of mapping in Newfoundland and Labrador of the floodway zones where floods have returned to a period of 20 years or a 5% chance in any year. The flooding fringe, where risk of flooding once every 100 years or 1% for a year. The flood risk areas have been mapped for 38 communities in our province. These maps are used for public information, municipal planning, development control, and the setting of the structural design criteria. All proposed developments in the flood risk zones are evaluated against the potential impacts of water resources and structures themselves and also the surrounding areas. To help support climate change adaptation, these flood risk mapping studies are being updated and new ones are being undertaken for the climate change projections. These initiatives is important for the public safety and information for municipalities, development plans, and the setting of structures, designs, and criteria, flood response, etc. The flood zones areas help minimize flood damage to properties and the environment and restrict activities that could degrade the water resources. The floods, public safety, and climate change are an integral linked together. Due to climate change, the frequency and intensity of the extreme precipitation events such as hurricanes that result in the flooding is expected to increase in our area. The climate change alters precipitation patterns will result in new communities experiencing regular floods and communities with existing flooding issues experiencing more intense and extensive flooding incidences in their areas. The hurricane season flood alert system is based on the forecast precipitation amounts and seeks to provide communities with flood warning services as a key to climate change adaptations and public safety tools. The alerts are provided to the communities that have flood risk mapping studies on publication, intensity, duration of the frequency curves, and they precipitation based on the flooding triggers that can be derived. It is gives hurricane warnings from June to December in our area. The communities in Newfoundland and Labrador are as well those across Atlantic Canada are vulnerable to climate change and need to be prepared for projected impacts. And the important first step for a community is to assess how, where, and what to what extent they are vulnerable in these impacts. With funding from the Natural Resources of Canada Regional Application Coalition Program, the Department of the Environment and Climate Change partnered with Memorial University of Newfoundland and Labrador and the municipalities of Newfoundland and Labrador to develop a step-by-step guide to help communities assess their vulnerability to climate change. This climate change vulnerability assessment tool is 7 steps to assess climate change vulnerability in your community, was adapted by and from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and piloted in 6 Newfoundland and Labrador communities. The tool is designed for communities with limited resources and does not require any technical expertise to be used. This tool can serve as a guide for the community leaders and decision makers, providing a means for quick analysis of the local climate change's impacts and the possible adaptations. Municipalities in Newfoundland and Labrador, professional municipal administrators, with funding assistance from the Department of the Environment and Climate Change, developed a municipal infrastructure training tool. The tool is managing municipalities' infrastructure in the climate change, is used for a training tool to help municipalities staff, manage, and prepare for the impacts of climate change. For more information, it can be obtained on the Newfoundland government website under Environment and Wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And now we'd like to welcome Carolyn McFadden from Prince Edward Island. Carolyn, I hope I said your name properly.
You did. Yes, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here. I took a little bit of a different approach in my presentation, and I want to talk about something that is new to Prince Edward Island, is new to Canada, and it's called a clean technology park. The government of PEI is planning to build what is called a clean tech park in Georgetown, Prince Edward Island. You can see on the left of your screen in Kings County, you can see Georgetown, and it's right on the harbor. And there's a picture of the beautiful Georgetown Harbor. Georgetown was founded in 1732, but was long inhabited by our native Mi'kmaq Nation. The population in 2016 was 555 people. It's a beautiful harbor town that was once a huge shipbuilding hub for Prince Edward Island. This $25,000 million park will be built in phases, and it becomes a hub for businesses and education and will include a 44,000 square foot clean tech learning and innovation center, as well as a 25-hectare business park. Clean tech can refer to many different things. It could be renewable energy. It could be storage for renewable energy. It could be a solution for agriculture to help us meet our carbon-free goals, such as wind energy, which it is becoming extremely popular, efficient as renewable energy on PEI. And Prince Edward Island is global leaders in wind energy. The importance of this announcement is that we're not just building industry, we're building an opportunity to be innovative. The new Clean Tech Park will be the first of its kind in Canada, and we hope other provinces will look to PEI for ideas on how to build clean tech initiatives of their own. The park will also include an academy that will offer new programs developed by UPEI and Holland College. The president of Holland College, Sandy McDonald, states, "We are thrilled to work alongside of the government and UPEI to ensure students have ample opportunities to help build what's next." Holland College will offer a certificate in clean tech leadership starting in the fall of 2023. The president of UPEI said that the tech park provides a career development opportunity for students. They will get the chance to work within the private sector or in entrepreneurial settings. He said these types of work placements are very valuable. UPEI and Holland College say that overall the park is an important step for PEI in general to move towards clean technology and net zero. UPEI will offer a master's degree in clean tech leadership starting in 2024, which is also when the new Learning and Innovative Center is expected to open. The business park will also be the first of 3 proposed tax-free clean tech development zones in the province. It's driven by net zero. The new clean tech park has some interesting potential, according to 2 leaders in the field, one in Canada and the other in Denmark. Tyler Hamilton has been working in the clean tech field for 15 years. He's currently the director of clean tech for the MARS Discovery District in Toronto, which is a nonprofit urban innovation hub that supports startups in the clean tech sector. He quotes, "Clean tech is a very broad term. It captures a lot of things, but generally we think of it as anything that is a technology that reduces environment and climate impacts, but does so in a way that's also very economical." The clean tech sector has expanded dramatically in recent years, and the amount of capital that's available for both the private sector and government seems like it's the very top of mind for a lot of investors. And it's being recognized as a necessity if we're going to meet net zero targets around climate change. The Canadian government also sees it as an engine of economic growth in the 21st century. So the idea of having UPEI and Holland College programs at the park makes sense. It gives a home for companies that will spin out of that research and that academic environment to set up shop, establish roots, and to grow. Net zero targets are increasingly interest in the clean tech sector, with thousands of corporations around the world have set ambitious net zero goals for 2040 and 2050. Now, I mentioned that there was 2. There was one from Canada, but the interesting one is from Denmark. And you'll see in the center of the screen there, a small little island called Samsø. This is called the Green Island. Søren Hamundsen is the director of the Samsø Energy Academy in Samsø, Denmark, a small island that has become a model for renewable energy and sustainability. Samsø was part of the inspiration for PEI's proposed clean tech park, after a delegation from Prince Edward Island visited Samsø and the Academy in 2019. Mr. Hermansen states that from my point of view, clean tech is energy-related technology that produces out of nature energy. It can be solar, wind, leftover biomass, waste, things that are already in circulation. And you can see here that the wind power turbines cover 100% of the electrical needs of the 4,200 residents on the Danish island of Samsø. Samsø has also completely converted its energy system from fossil fuels to renewable fuels, including straw burning furnaces. Now, I know Prince Edward Island has had straw burning furnaces before. There's been several farms that have had straw burning furnaces. My husband actually had looked into doing one for our farm when we were farming, but it never got to that point. But you can see the straw there on the left-hand side being loaded into the furnace. And it's a wonderful way to use what we already have. You're not adding more fossil fuel to the equation than you had before, and you can treat your production and your consumption in a sustainable way. Technologies that are helping society to do so, that is recognized as a clean tech. Samsung won the UN Global Climate Action Award for the climate leadership in October of 2021. And there you can see what they're, and I'm not sure if this is all of their buildings, but I know that that's part of what I was able to find. PEI has a similar opportunity as to this island of Samsø, or his island of Samsø, where they recently won that award. And we have a new role in Canada as being the Green Island of Canada. And there's a picture of PEI all green. PEI green and pristine. As WI members, we're very proud in the spring when roadside cleanup comes around. All islanders seem to get involved. And this year on May 14th marks our 50th year event of roadside cleanup on PEI. Lots of families and groups get organized and walk out on our highways, roadsides, and ditches. And thanks to all Islanders who take the time and the effort to keep PEI clean and pristine. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. That was a wonderful presentation. Now I'd like to welcome Jacqueline Melvin and Eleanor Lilly from Nova Scotia.
Okay.
Is Jacqueline on mute?
I'm here. Am I not? Am I not on?
Yeah, you're on.
You were on, yes.
Okay, okay. So I guess this beginning part must be what I sent in, and just to I guess elaborate a little bit on it, like the increased high winds events. Well, it requires us to build stronger buildings, and so you have to have more nails in your buildings. You have to have stronger framework and whatnot, which is all increases your insurances and other costs like that. With the heavy rains events that we are having, well, we get road washouts and crops could drown out. And if they're underwater for more than 2 days, then basically they're a crop failure. So that's, you know, all of this is happening with the climate change that's happening in Nova Scotia. Now we also have increased temperatures, and with the increase of temperatures, if a crop is in a over 30-degree temperature for 3 days, it's basically a crop loss because it can't handle that kind of temperature. And then our increase in drought requires us to put in more irrigation, which costs more, increases the costs, and affects the cost of our food and the supplies. So we, you know, it keeps it hard. Now here's an example of how it looks like things are heading throughout Nova Scotia in the next number of years. This takes us right up to 2095. We just put this on here just to give you an idea. I mean, like you go from 2010 to even 2050, you go from a 6.6 degree to 9.2. So it's, you know, and then you get way up there. So it really is, I mean, our hottest days are coming hotter and hotter every year. We've gone from 29.6 to 32.4 by 2050 is what they're projecting. So we, you know, it's scary, I guess, is the thing. So you know, so, you know, just this is just something to look at. I don't want to go into detail on this. And then we have our precipitation projections for Nova Scotia. You know, there days of rain. I mean, we get too many days of rain, and you get crop failures. Like you say, if you get crops sitting underwater for more than 2 days, it's basically right off. And once you can get back on the land, you basically plow it under. So it's you know, I don't know, we're not heading in a good direction, in my opinion. But so there's a chart there just to kind of go through. And so here's a summary of some of the key messages that are, you know, it's getting warmer, change in precipitation patterns, more frequent and intense storms, sea levels are rising, our oceans are changing. We need to do something. So okay, now is this still what are farmers doing to deal with climate change? Okay, so we a majority of farms have 5-year environmental plans set in place, and that's to manage erosion and try not to, you don't plant too close to streams because of chemical pollutions, and cover crops can help to reduce the chemical nitrogen, which is made from fossil fuels. So cover crops soil, it helps with the soil health and builds organic matter, reduces tillage, and we protect our woodlands. Many of the farmers have plans for how to protect this also. So we look for, and then ways for biodiversity and renewable resources. Farmers are using their own manure to produce methane gas in biodigesters, and that produces energy, and also solar panels are being used to help to energy. So I think that's basically covers it, farmers. And then here we have sea level rises.
Oh,
So
okay. Thank you, Jacqueline. So welcome to Nova Scotia. As you can see, I just want to briefly speak about the sea. Nova Scotia is nearly all surrounded by sea, with sea levels expected to rise between 68 and 100 centimeters by 2100. And that's not including any instability in the Arctic ice sheet. Storm surges and high tides are also influences on our water levels. Wind speeds are projected to increase, and our wave heights also, by 2 centimeters per decade in the summer and 20 centimeters per decade in the winter. So in the next slide, the hazards of rising sea levels are shown. So I don't have a lot of information on this. I just added it into part of my presentation. So it increases coastal flooding, storm surges in high tides, saltwater intrusion on our lands, and obviously the coastal ecology is affected by that. Thanks, Elaine. So what is Nova Scotia doing? Nova Scotia is a national leader in fighting climate change. We have the most ambitious targets in the country for reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. I'm just going to choose 2 or 3 of the highlights here, and the LED light that's in there. Nova Scotia was the first province to require energy efficient LED street lights. The LED street lights are expected to use less than half the energy of traditional lights and reduce emissions by more than 50%. Now, composters. More than 95% of residents have access to curbside pickups, and 48 of the 50 municipalities use clear bags to enhance diversion of organics and recyclables. Legislation. The Environmental Goals and Climate Change Reduction Act sets the most ambitious goals. 1, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 53% below 2005 levels by the year 2030, and to achieve net zero emissions in Nova Scotia by 2050. Okay, helping to fight climate change. Thanks to the hard work of Nova Scotians over the last decade, we've been able to add renewable energy to our grid, develop tidal and wind energy, and increase our energy efficiency. What can you do to help climate change? The efforts of local people have helped Nova Scotia become a national leader in the fight against climate change. You can join the effort by using less energy to drive, heat your home, power and lights. In Nova Scotia, there's 2 groups that you can contact for more help to learn about what you can do around your home businesses. And they are Efficiency Nova Scotia and the Clean Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline and Eleanor. That was a really interesting presentation as well. And now I'd like to welcome Angela Scott from New Brunswick.
Good evening, everybody. Tonight, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about where the emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions come from in New Brunswick. Just to give an overview, that's all this will be tonight. I've contacted the Department of Environment and Local Government, and they work in conjunction with public safety to deal with emergencies and whatnot as they come along. So in New Brunswick, the #1 category for greenhouse emissions is industry. And for us in New Brunswick, that primarily is forestry. The forestry industry has been tasked with trying to tame their activities. I wouldn't dare to say how successful they are or not. It's a very political issue, I'm afraid. Next would come transportation. There is a great initiative to support electric cars and vehicles and trucks in the province. So that seems to be working well. So I had 31% industry, 28% transportation. The next area of greenhouse gas emissions we have is the 24% of electricity generation. We were using a lot of oil and coal to produce energy. And as you may or may not know, we do have Point-Lepreau, which is an atomic reactor for nuclear power here in New Brunswick. And we are thinking about producing more of those. Next, we would have home improvement. Under buildings, 9% of our greenhouse emissions come from buildings. So there's an initiative to help support New Brunswickers with their home improvements. And then at 4% each, we have agriculture and waste. Under agriculture, we have responsible stewardship initiatives that have been in place for many years, along with environmental farm plans. And in waste, we're still talking about recycling. And I know for a fact we're not as far ahead as some other provinces are. One of our greatest issues in New Brunswick is we really don't have enough people. But we in our latest census had made our way up to 800,000 people. So it's not a lot of people to achieve a lot of initiatives. The province is already experiencing the impacts of climate change. New Brunswick's mean annual temperature has already increased by 1.1 degrees Celsius in the last 30 years. Rising sea levels have also increased the risk of flooding and coastal erosion. Historically, the province has experienced extreme weather events that have caused catastrophic damages. Since December 2016, a number of these weather events have occurred, including a snow and freezing rainstorm that moved across the province, causing long duration of power outages and destroyed much of the electrical distribution infrastructure in the Acadian Peninsula. In 2018 and 2019, the province experienced back-to-back spring flooding along the St. John River. You'll see the picture that Lynn has provided is a picture of our capital, Fredericton. And the record-setting floods were the highest damage costs of any flood event in the history of New Brunswick. Additionally, in late summer of 2019, post-tropical storm Dorian brought high winds and rain to the region that resulted in an extensive property and infrastructure damage along the shoreline. How has climate change affected everything in New Brunswick? Warmer temperatures, wetter seasons, stormier seasons, windier seasons. Wind is a huge issue, and rising sea levels. In 2016, the government started legislation here that they were able to finally pass in March 2020, believe it or not, around the topic of supporting climate change initiatives. But since then, some of those aspects have changed. It says here that New Brunswick has already made significant progress in lowering emissions, having reduced our emissions by 34% since 2005. To date, greenhouse gas reductions in New Brunswick have been achieved through significant actions related to the closures of coal and oil-fired plants, the incorporation of wind energy, restructuring in the forestry sector, and investments in energy efficiency, fuel switching, and increased penetration of natural gas into the marketplace. And that's it.
Thanks, Angela. That was
You're
great.
welcome. You're welcome.
Next, I'd like to invite Linda Zellum from Ontario to do her presentation. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending and listening to what each province is trying to do to combat climate change. The program that I'm going to tell you a little bit about was set out by the previous government. And the action plan was put into place for the next 5 years, and it was to fight, obviously, climate change and to reduce greenhouse gas pollution and help and move all of us into a prosperous, low carbon economy. That said, as of April the 1st, we are now paying 11 cents per liter for our gas. That is a carbon tax. And companies like Toyota, Cami, and Ford are all now changing some of their lines to make electric vehicles, which I'm sure other plants are doing the same thing. The plan also recognizes the tremendous economic opportunities that exist for Ontario as the entire world seeks to mitigate and adapt to climate change. It's trying to ensure that our businesses, innovators, and researchers are well positioned to develop the clean technologies and low carbon solutions that hopefully will ensure competitiveness, maintain existing jobs, and create new ones. The plan also was to help households and First Nations and Métis communities transition to low carbon economy, use less energy, and save more money by investing in initiatives, again, that reduce greenhouse gas pollution, such as home energy retrofits, electrical vehicle incentives, that's if we can afford the new vehicles, transit and social housing retrofits. So whether you live in Northern or Southern Ontario, in a rural area or big city, the actions in this plan will help you to reduce your carbon footprint. Fighting climate change means transforming the way we live, move, and work. We already have the technology we need to make that transition, but we need to get more low carbon technologies into Ontario homes and businesses. Through this action plan, they will help protect and transition existing jobs, hopefully create new jobs, and help Ontario families along the way. The actions will help more Ontario households and businesses adapt low and net zero carbon energy solutions in homes, vehicles, and workplaces. And we will lead North America in low carbon and zero emission transportation. And we will halt rising greenhouse gas pollution from buildings by retrofitting existing buildings, ensuring that future buildings have the lowest possible emissions. They wanted to also continue to be a strong center of modern, clean manufacturing and jobs, and a leader in the clean tech sector. They wanted to become a leading North American hub for low and net carbon technology. That said, according to a report by our Auditor General, the Ministry of the Environment will only hit 1/5 of the forecast that Ontario had for 2030. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. That's some amazing stats there. So now I'd like to welcome, excuse me, Karen Gerwing from Saskatchewan.
Oops. Okay, hopefully you can hear me. I just posted a link to the page that I'm looking at for the Saskatchewan climate change strategy. It's about prairie resilience. So we're more into focusing on adaptation instead of the mitigation. Climate change has been going on for decades, the dirty 30s, the droughts of 61, 88, 2001, along with all the other changes. So about prairie resilience, the province has been implementing prairie resilience, a made in Saskatchewan climate change strategy since it was launched in December of 2017. The core principle of it, of course, is resilience, the ability to cope with, adapt to, and recover from stress and change. Prairie resilience is a strategy that takes a system-wide approach and includes more than 40 commitments designed to make Saskatchewan more resilient to the effects of a changing climate. The commitments, which go beyond emissions and reductions alone, span Saskatchewan's natural systems and resources, infrastructure for electricity, transportation, homes and buildings, and community preparedness. The climate resilient measurement framework monitors resilience-related progress in 5 key areas: natural systems, including our land, water, and forests; physical infrastructure; economics, sustainability; community preparedness; and the well-being of people to adapt and prosper in a changing environment. There's another one I was going to read. So among its many objectives, the growth plan expresses the specific goals related to a low carbon economy, such as delivering on Saskatchewan's climate change plan to reduce carbon emissions, reducing carbon emissions in electricity production, and advancing the development of zero emission small modular reactor technology using Saskatchewan uranium. So that could open a lot more things to talk about, but I know that is one thing in Saskatchewan they have looked at with the uranium here. So all those documents are available on the web page that I put in the chat for the link there. So thank you for letting each of the provinces participate in this climate change discussion this evening.
Thank you, Karen. So again, that link is in the chat room, and we can review that later on, but again, thanks, Karen. At this point, I'd like to welcome Linda Mason from Alberta. So Linda, if you could take the floor, it's all yours.
Okay, thanks, Margaret. So due to the increased frequency and severity of extreme weather events caused by climate change, there has been a negative impact on agricultural in Alberta. Pork crop production has been seen over the past years due to early winters, drought, flooding, also causing depressed livestock production and financial loss. Farming infrastructure are long-term impacts of the global warming. Climate change is expected to impact Alberta's native species and ecosystem, including clean water and crop pollination, due to extreme weather events with droughts, forest fires, and heavy precipitation with the associated increased risk of flooding. Alberta has experienced the 2 most costly disasters in the country history, with the Fort McMurray wildfires at $3.58 billion and the 2013 Southern Alberta foothills floods at $1.7 billion. Warmer temperatures reduce soil moisture, creating conditions for continued mountain pine beetle infestations. Grasslands are displacing existing forest ecosystems and thus creates greater incidence of forest fires. Recent trends and future projections for water resources include loss of water stored as ice and snow, which will affect the timing and the level of water flows in major river basins, lower summer streams flows, and falling lake levels. I live near the Little Red Deer River in central Alberta, and in 2005, the river flooded, washing out roads, flooding basements in nearby houses, and stranding livestock. Last year, this same river was at its lowest level of water ever seen in a multitude of years. Climate change could affect energy supplies by disrupting energy generation and supplies during extreme weather events, and increased stress on transmission infrastructure. Between 1983 and 2008, Alberta averaged around 100 million a year in catastrophic losses due to extreme events, hailstorms, wildfires, flooding, etc. From 2009 to 2012, Alberta averaged 673 million a year in insured losses from extreme weather events. Some of the emission reduction programs that Alberta has introduced is the Alberta Methane Emission Program. This program supports the development of methane emission reduction technology to boost provincial emissions management efforts. Methane emissions in Alberta will be reduced by 45% by 2025. Baseline and Reduction Opportunity Assessment Program. This program offers financial support to small and medium conventional oil and gas operators to assess and reduce on-site methane emissions. Carbon capture, utilization and storage. 2 commercial scale projects reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 2.76 million tons each year. Carbon competitiveness, just got new teeth and don't know how to use them. Carbon competitiveness incentive regulation, information for industry on Alberta approach to reduce emissions from larger industrial emitters. Hydrogen roadmap. Alberta is building a lower emission energy future with hydrogen. Energy efficiency, carbon capture, utilization, and storage. The IEE CCUS grant program offers funding support for industrial energy efficiency and carbon capture, utilization, and storage projects. Sector-specific industrial energy efficiency grant program. The SIEE grant program offers support funding for energy efficiency projects in Alberta's emission-intensive and trade-exposed facilities. Technology innovation and emission reduction system. Alberta's approach to reducing emissions from large industrial emitters and keeping industry competitive. Transportation maintenance and construction. Agreements that encourage emission reduction and climate change adaptation for transportation construction and maintenance activities. We here in Alberta have a saying that if you don't like the weather, wait a minute and it'll change. In the past couple of months, we have had spring and 2 days of summer in March, and now in April, we have winter. Last year, my garden was planted in April. This year, while watching the snow come down, my bedding out plants are wondering when they might see the outdoors. My zucchini is now waiting for that and is producing flowers. Unfortunately for them, no pollinators are allowed in my house, but a good friend did tell me how to pollinate them by myself using a Q-tip. So I might have zucchinis growing in my basement rather than outdoors. Thank you from Alberta.
Thank you, Linda. Well, you'll have to send us some zucchini when they're ready.
I'm going to have lots.
And now I'd like to welcome Colleen Hooper from British Columbia.
Hi, everyone. The same thing. I'm going to talk about the flooding, climate change, and the extreme weather that happened in the Fraser Valley for the flooding that happened there. And next slide, please. The flooding is nothing new to the Fraser Valley. In fact, there's been several devastating floods in the valley's history. But when it rains, a month's worth of rain in less than 2 hours, then you have a flood of cataclysmic proportion. Next. Oh, the two pictures back there were the floods from 1898 and 1948, which were huge, devastating floods. But, and if we go ahead to the next word, experts have warned that this kind of extreme weather will become more common with global temperatures on the rise. And so you can see the road and the railroad, the road and the river. What was left of it. So, and then for this, the next slide, sorry. The global temperatures have risen at least 1.2 degrees. I know earlier on from, where was it, Nova Scotia? No, they were saying about how the temperatures were rising, but Canada is warming twice as fast as the global temperature. Here in BC, we have it higher, and the same thing, the statistics were for Quebec and BC are higher for global warming in their temperatures. And the cause of the rise of moisture in the air. And so that, of course, makes more rain come down. Experts much more and much larger atmospheric rivers, can't get my mouth to work. And an atmospheric with an atmospheric river is when there's clouds of rain and they're coming from the equator, and because they're warm, they can come further north and they are collecting warm rainwater as they come. So when they dump it, That's all there is to it. When this happened, there was 100 centimeters fell in Abbotsford, Agassiz, and Chilliwack. And then 200 millimeters fell in Agassiz and Chilliwack area. Hope had 250 milliliters fall in that time I've got milliliters down, it's supposed to be millimeters, but it fell in that length of time. So you can imagine in 2 hours, less than 2 days, that all that water fell and it completely devastated everything. And the lower mainland was completely cut off from northern BC. And they had to work on the roads quickly because the only route was to go out of BC through Alberta, take the northern route and come down. And then there was still a portion that was sitting in between that had flooding lock them in so that they couldn't get out from either way. Next, please. Part of the reason was that the culverts and the dikes were outdated and they couldn't hold the water, so it was going over the edge. And we'd also had a lot of rain before the flood came. There was tons of rain before that. So we're surrounded by mountains on all sides. They're steep, and the little rivers and creeks that were in them couldn't contain that water anymore. And basically the water had nowhere to go. So it went down at a huge rate and took out like the railroad and the highways and any kind of structures that were in their way. They just took them out. And the next slide I've got, I was going to talk about, this is pictures of Lytton and the fire. And what we wanted to talk about was the fact that Lytton, it's just in the middle, and but what they call the middle of it all. It was the site of a perfect storm, like the flood was a perfect storm. It just all came at one time. And Lytton has always had record-breaking temperatures. It's always hot there. but they've been extremely hot in the last little while. And that was before the fire went through the town. And what happened because of the what they consider the layers, the trees had no more no growth left underneath them because of the heat. So, and the trees were all tinder dry. So when the fire started, and it just started in grass, and it went through the village in like 5 minutes. It was really a fast thing. So when it went through, it took out everything in its path, the trees, the underbrush, everything. So now when the any rain is starting and they call for a rainfall warning, especially, they close the highway that's above Lytton because they're afraid that the whole side is going to come down because again, there's no water, no roots to hold the water to when it's coming down the mountainside. So it just comes barreling down and produces, well, so far it's just produced mini slides, but if it wanted to, it could just slide all the way down into Lytton again. So if you consider that, like the number of forest fires we have in BC, and it takes a long time before the living trees and brush can grow again to retain themselves. So what's next? Although experts can't blame any single weather event, they know that warm air holds more moisture, which means any storm can and will produce more rain. A layering system is called, or a cascading system, will mean more atmospheric rivers which will bring larger landslides and floods. And the cascade that they're talking about is, first of all, we have global warming. And the global warming warms the ground, warms the trees, causes the droughts, causes the trees, which a root system can go down 20 feet underneath a tree. And if it's all gone, there's nowhere to catch that water. So then, of course, then that land slides down into the valley or wherever. It slides down, and then, of course, you have the flooding come up. The infrastructure won't hold it all, and that's what happened in at the dike that holds the Nipissing River on the American side in Washington State, and it flows towards BC, and so it was already flooded. Our side was already flooded. It took out the big dike that was there holding it back, and they'd been told that wasn't going to be good enough in future years. However, it was never remade, but now it is. Now it's I think 4 feet higher than what it was before, so that all the diking systems should have that for the next flood, because it's going to get worse. And so every town should be considering that infrastructure and what they can do to help this water get its way through. And the picture back with the water laying in the valley, that's Sumas Prairie, and it's a river bottom, I mean a lake bottom, and they drained the lake to put houses there. Well, it doesn't go good with flooding. It really caused, it just sat there in Sumas Prairie instead of passing on to wherever it would pass on to. So thank you very much. That's it for the flooding.
Thank you, Colleen. A lot of interesting information there as well. And right now I'd like to introduce Lynn McLean, our president-elect, who will bring us some international examples.
Thank you, President Margaret, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening on this discussion on climate change. So we're going to step outside of Canada and go to a little country called Malawi, which is located on the southeast side of Africa. It, as you can see from this map, it's long and narrow and is bordered by Lake Malawi on one side, Tanzania, Mozambique, and Zambia on the other sides. So my sister and her husband and a group of others went to Malawi to learn about climate change in 2018 and how it affects the food security of people in developing countries. And as you will recall from the last roundtable, food security is simply ensuring everyone has access to enough nutritional food so that they can live active and healthy lives. The consistent message they heard from the Malayan farmers was that their world is rapidly changing and that change is due to climate. For generations, they used to plant crops based on the very predictable timing of the rainy season. And the onset of the rainy season is no longer predictable. So knowing when to plant has become a guessing game. Once the crop has germinated, it is now much more susceptible to wilting and failure from drought. With no access to irrigation, they rely solely on Mother Nature to send the rain. And when the rains do come, they often come in huge downpours or flash floods. The result has been complete washout of crops and the loss of topsoil into the rivers, resulting in long-term loss of agricultural productivity. Between 2015 and 2018, there was an increase from 1.9 to almost 3 million people without sufficient food resources in Malawi alone. And the largest contributing factor is climate change and the inability for the farmers to adapt. A crop failure for many in Malawi means the difference between feeding your family or not. With 80% of 19 million people living on farms and growing crops to feed themselves, it is not hard to see why this country is feeling the impact. This is Anita and Christopher, and that's my brother-in-law, Greg in the middle. And they visited and stayed with this family in Malawi for a few days. But this family 15 years ago were desperate. They were dealing with hunger and the malnutrition of their 2 children. With the help of the Canadian Food Grains Bank's Agricultural Development Project, they are now self-sufficient. While they don't have much, they do have enough nutritious food to provide for themselves, 5 children and 3 grandchildren. They have a 10-acre farm, which is huge by local standards, and work at it all by hand. 15 years ago, they grew just maize and tobacco. And similar to the work that's done with the ACWW projects, the Canadian Food Grains Bank project has allowed this family to diversify their production and the foods that the family eats. They now grow maize, sugar beans, kavasta, sweet potato, ground nuts, sorghum, pears, mangoes, and bananas. They also have some goats, chickens, and pigs, and their farm goal is to have 2 cows. My sister shares, while sitting in their home, talking with their family and neighbors, eating the food that this family produced and seeing the impact a project like this one has had was humbling. The CFGB project was key in helping this family and many of their neighbors. In fact, the project was so successful that the community has now closed the ward in the local hospital that was previously dedicated to child malnutrition cases. That ward is simply no longer required because of the long-term impact of the project. Anita and Chris's lives are simple in many ways, but precarious in that the impact of climate change is throwing new challenges at them. Although this family is relatively strong now, many other Malawian families are not so fortunate. And as we have heard tonight, climate change does impact us. But for the developing world, climate change means that whole families may not be able to eat for several months. The irony is that the industrialized world is emitting the bulk of the carbon emissions causing the climate shift. But the sub-Sahara world, where many of the poorest live, are the ones paying the biggest price. That's my story, Margaret.
Thank you, Lynn. That was really interesting. I think how we live and what they've gone through. Lessons to be learned. Now we're going to move on back to Colleen Hooper with some fashion industry news. Colleen.
You're muted. You're muted, Colleen.
Sorry. Next slide, please. Fast fashion is one of the highest polluting industries in the world, aside from oil and gas. Next slide. It's instant gratification. You can have your clothes right now, and it's what it is. If you to define it, it's cheap fabrics, affordable to everyone, and the stores, the fashion stores can get the fashions in once a week. Now, we used to have, so that we would have a fashion show, and you'd have the spring and you'd have a fall collection, and you would love to wait, well, I did, for the clothes to come in and for what you could see that that you want to wear. Now, when you see somebody on the runway with something you like, you can have that following week. They'll have it in the stores for you. So I know it started with they started with cruise wear. And so you had the seasons, and then you had cruise wear. And then they started it up further from that. But the problem is it causes a huge amount of pollution in the fact that it's only 13% of our clothes and footwear are recycled. All the rest ends up in a dump, in a landfill somewhere, whether it's Canada or anywhere else. So it falls in somewhere else, and it ends up as landfill. And the companies that do this, that are considered this, are the Gap, Zara, H&M, Torrid, any of those that you get like a notice once a week they've got new clothing in. That's because it is new clothing. And then whatever they do, they don't, like if you go there and say, I want that dress, they say, no, sorry, because that's it. They only have a certain amount of supply, and it comes in for that week, and that's it. So then they're on to the next supply. And of course, it's to get people to buy all the way along. Next slide, please. So the wonderful facts about it, if you want to call it that, the toxic chemicals that they use for dyes and cleaning, I spelled dyes wrong. The toxic chemicals are like they use it, and then of course that goes into the water system and they use chemicals to ship it, because there's a big bug population on the ships as they're coming over. So to deter that and to kill off whatever bugs they've got, they have sprays to kill them off so they don't come into the country, because that's a whole another ball of wax, because the introduction of new creatures into our ecosystem isn't a good idea. So, like I said, there's 3 out of 5 items get thrown away, and they're in the landfill at least a year before after they've been purchased. And these garment industries produce 100 billion garments each year. The garment industry is also is responsible for 8 to 10% of global greenhouse gases, and 1/3 of the microplastic in the ocean comes from synthetics, and it comes out of when you are washing your clothes as well. And they say, I looked at for statistics, and I found various statistics all over the place and various amounts. So if you have another amount that you think it should be, then fine, but this is what I found. And it's also, it takes 1,800 gallons of water to make a pair of jeans. Why? Because you start out from the beginning, from watering the cotton, and then all the way into the dyes. Using the dyes, all need a mass amount of water to put dyes into clothes. So, and but if you're using synthetics, it's a ton of water. Now, I don't know what the difference between is, but a ton of water for to make something synthetic. And it's a misconception that cotton is better, because the same thing, you still have to use water to dye it. Yes, it will disintegrate in the landfill faster than a synthetic will. And the industry is responsible for 20% of water waste. Next slide, please. So where do we go from here? The fashion industry is The fashion industry is working on responsible garments, but many critics believe that this is only a way to get people to buy more garments, and so far they've been still huge amounts of waste and pollution. What can you do? Well, they often call they're making garments out of the old garments, and H&M is one of these companies that's been doing it for a long time, that you can take your clothing in, your old clothing, and you get 15% off or 10% off your next item. And they say that it's going to be, they're going to use them. And supposedly they're to use them to make new clothing out of it, and what they call responsible clothing. So I don't know if you've been looking in your ads, that some of them will say responsible clothing or responsible fabric in this item, or whatever. It'll say something about that. And that is because they are saying that they're working on these. And if they are, it's a good thing. But on the other hand, they call this greenwashing, because they're washing over the fact that it's not really doing anything, but it makes it look like they're doing something. And they're still using a large amount of pesticides for it. And I know organic cotton is supposed to not use any pesticides at all, and nothing chemical to make the organic cotton, but it also makes it like triple the price, at least double the price for it. So what can you do about it? Well, you could buy less clothes and buy higher quality clothes that you can keep for season after season. Now that's been a big taboo for people, because they want the instant gratification. Oh, I'll go wear this. And a lot of garments are only worn once and then they're gotten rid of, because that was just for that event. So instead of keeping a dress for into the next seasons, they're not. And this is causing huge waste and pollution problems. So and if you're going to recycle to people because like a lot of times you'll recycle to your shops, and if the clothes are poor quality or not stitched right, they just throw them out, because there's no use for them in the store. So that's it. So what I'm asking is, what can you do? What can we do? And it is a global problem, and it has to be, something has to be done, because it is causing greenhouse gases for us in Canada and other countries. And also, before I leave, I'd like to say, I didn't get into this. There's a whole thing about the people that make these garments and how they are in third world countries and how they're not being paid at a good rate. And I know they've been working on that, but anyway, that's, I would like to say about that. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. That's a lot of food for thought there. As you know, we are surrounded from coast to coast to coast by oceans. And I am really looking forward to hearing from Denise Joss of Manitoba on what's happening with climate change and the oceans. So Denise, thank you. Denise, you must
Thank you
be,
very much,
there you
Margaret.
go. Okay.
You might wonder why a girl from the prairies is talking about the oceans. But as Margaret said, we're surrounded on 3 sides by oceans. And there are some very important points that I came across while I was researching with my students about different ecosystems in the world. And I really did not realize how important oceans were for us. So please bear with me as we go through some of these details. First one is coral reef bleaching. And if you look at the picture, you can see that a lot of the coral in this picture is white or a grayish color. What triggers this coral bleaching? The leading cause of coral bleaching is climate change. And a warming planet means a warming ocean. And a change in water temperature of just as little as 2 degrees Fahrenheit can cause coral to drive out algae, and coral may bleach for other stresses like extremely low tides, pollution, or too much sunlight. I'm not going to talk about pollution in my statistics and information. I'm just going to talk about the climate change affecting the water, the oceans. So what is coral bleaching? Coral bleaching happens when corals lose their vibrant colors and turn white, but there's a lot more to it than that. Coral are bright and colorful because of microscopic algae called zooxanthellae. The zooxanthellae live within the coral in a mutually beneficial relationship, each helping the other survive. But when the ocean environment changes, if it gets too hot, for an instance, the coral stresses out and expels the algae. And as the algae leaves, the coral fades until it looks like it's been bleached. If the temperature stays high, the coral won't let the algae back and the coral will die. Does bleaching kill the coral reefs? Bleaching leaves the coral reefs vulnerable to disease. It stunts their growth. It affects reproduction and can impact other species that depend on the coral communities. According to the United Nations environmental programs, between 2014 and 2016, this was the longest recorded global bleaching events, and it killed coral on an unprecedented scale. In 2016, bleaching of coral on the Great Barrier Reef off of Australia killed between 29 and 50% of the reef's coral. Let's go to the next slide. How does coral bleaching impact on wildlife? Why does it matter? It matters because once these corals die, the reefs rarely come back. And with few corals surviving, they struggle to reproduce, and the entire reef ecosystems on which people and wildlife depend will deteriorate. Bleaching also matters because it's not an isolated phenomenon. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, between 2014 and 2017, around 75% of the world's tropical coral reefs experienced heat stress severe enough to trigger bleaching. And for 30% of the world's reefs, that heat stress was enough to kill the coral. So how does it impact on the wildlife? Coral reefs support some of the most biodiverse ecosystems on our planet. Thousands of marine animals depend on coral reefs for survival, including some species of sea turtles, fish, crabs, shrimp, jellyfish, seabirds, starfish, and many more. Coral reefs provide shelter, spawning grounds, and protection from predators. They also support organisms at the base of the ocean food chains. As reef ecosystems collapse, already at-risk species may face extinction. So how does this coral bleaching impact humans? Coral bleaching impacts people's livelihoods, their food security, and safety. Coral reefs are natural barriers that absorb the force of waves and storm surges. They keep coastal communities safe. Without them, we have to rely on man-made seawalls. These are expensive, they're less effective, and environmentally they damage during construction. Bleached coral also compounds the overfishing crisis that by removing links in the food webs and depriving some fish and crustacean species of a place on and develop. Anyone relying on these animals as a primary source of income or protein will be in trouble. Finally, reef tourism brings in billions of dollars each year and supports thousands of jobs. Bleached coral reefs devoid of these magnificent marine species jeopardize it all. In the next slide, I want to talk about how 5 ways that climate change affects the oceans. And this is updated as of December 2021. So this is very, very important. And we can stay with this slide for a while. Higher temperatures are bad for fish and for us. Warmer waters threaten to cause mass migration of marine species in search of the right conditions for feeding and spawning. For example, Conservation International research revealed that ocean warming is altering the habitats of tuna, causing them to move significantly over to the east of the Pacific Islands. This mass exodus could be catastrophic for the economies of many Pacific islands, such as Fiji and the Cook Islands. Change in the weather temperatures can also directly affect the development and growth of most fish and cephalopods, that's octopus and squid. For 3 billion people who rely on fish as their chief source of protein, the prospect of fewer and smaller fish in the sea is really bad news. Our polar ice is melting. That's that second point there. In what has become a dismal annual pattern, wintertime Arctic sea ice continues to dip to new lows as the oceans are warming. Meanwhile, Antarctica is shrinking underwater as submerged ice is rapidly melting, according to the studies. The effects of this warming on our iconic polar bear species are well documented, but underneath the surface of the ice, this problem is still very urgent, but it's not documented and studied as much. The production of algae, the foundation of the Arctic food web, depends on the presence of sea ice. And as it diminishes, the algae does too, and it causes a ripple effect on the species of Arctic cod to seals and whales and polar bears. Dwindling sea ice results in the loss of vibrant habitat for seals, walruses, penguins, whales, and other megafauna. Sea ice is critical for Antarctic krill, the food source for many seabirds and mammals in the Southern Ocean. As sea ice has receded in recent years, Antarctic krill populations have dropped, resulting in declines in the species that depend on krill. And just a note aside here, there's now a massive harvesting of krill by big trawlers, and they're dragging up the undersea, and they're harvesting this, and they're ruining the spawning beds, and they're ruining the conditions for this krill. And krill isn't something that we were eating, that people were eating, because it's part of the ecosystem that feeds the fish and the mammals. So it's very interesting that suddenly we're mining krill because it's healthy. What does it mean to us? Impacts to Arctic cod fisheries are having cascading effects, culminating in human-wildlife conflict and food insecurity. A dramatic decrease in the sea ice and the seafood pushes polar bears towards the coastal communities and hunting camps to find food, and it brings them closer contact with potential conflict for people. Point number 3 talks about the rising sea levels. And they're a slow and it seems unstoppable threat. Climate change poses a dual threat for sea levels. For one, when land-based polar ice melts, it finds its way to the sea. That's ice that forms in the polar seas, though, on the other hand, it doesn't affect the ice, the sea levels when it melts. It's only when it's leaking off, is melting and leaking off the land into the ocean that it's affecting the sea level. Second, when water warms, it expands and it takes up more space. And that's another cause for the sea rising. With sea level rise accelerating at a rate of about 1/8 of an inch per year, the effects on humanity are plain. Higher ocean temperatures are melting polar ice and glaciers from Greenland and Antarctic sheets at a rapid rate. And this is resulting in an unprecedented rise of sea levels that has the potential to displace more than 680 million people living in the low coastal communities, according to a 2019 UN report. Recent research revealed that several major coastal cities could be almost entirely underwater due to sea level rise by the middle of this century. And this would include Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, Shanghai in China, and Mumbai in India. These are very high population cities right on at the sea level. Critical coastal habitats, for instance, like the sea turtle nesting beaches, they're going to be lost as the sea level rises because you have natural and man-made barriers such as cliffs, mangrove forests, sea walls, coastal developments, and they stand in the way of these sea turtles migrating further inland to lay their nests. So that's another interesting fact that I found. Warming oceans alter currents. Climate change affects ocean temperatures as well as the wind patterns. And when you take those two together, they can alter the ocean currents. Many marine species' migratory patterns can change as the currents they follow are altered. And many species that depend on the ocean currents for reproduction and nutrients are affected. For example, reef-building coral and reef fish species rely on the dispersal of their larvae by currents. The impacts of changes in the ocean on humanity can be severe. We're seeing that in the Earth's climate. Europe's relatively mild climate is maintained in part by the Atlantic current called the Gulf Stream, which has implications worldwide for the climate, including changes in your rainfall, and with more rain in some areas and less in others. You also have fluctuating air temperatures. These change and they have serious implications on many animal species and humans. Climate change also affects the change of the seawater chemistry. That's the last point on this page. The same burning of fossil fuels that increases greenhouse gases levels in the atmosphere are also changing the chemical composition of seawater by making it more acidic. The ocean absorbs 30% of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and when that carbon dissolves into the water, it forms carbonic acid. So how does this affect marine life? The acid can dissolve the calcium carbonate shells of marine species such as corals, scallops, lobsters, and crabs, and some microscopic plankton throughout the ocean. These shell-forming organisms can provide critical habitats and food sources for other marine life. Increased acid levels can also limit the ability of certain fish to detect predators, and it disrupts the entire marine chain. We have many people that depend on the ocean for their food and for their livelihood. Unfortunately, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has issued a dire warning on the state of pollution and global warming, and they have given us about 12 years to make some significant changes. Any later, and some of the changes might be irreversible. But it's also time, don't give up hope. Let's go to the next slide. Here are some ways that we can reduce our carbon footprint, our own ways, our own self. And if we can reduce it, everyone could reduce it just by a little bit, it will have a great impact. So turn off your lights when you leave a room. Replace one business trip with a video call. We've certainly seen the cost of a lot of our organizations go down because we've been using video calls. Invest in reusable grocery bags. In some stores, you can't even get a bag now. You have to bring your own. Unplug things when you can. Set your washing machine to cold water. Turn the water off when you brush your teeth. That's a hard one for me because I can't stand the taste of toothpaste. Switch to a paperless billing system. Bring your own mug when you're going to different events. That GoPack pack I talked about when I was talking about public speaking, bring your own. Cut out the junk mail if you can. Don't print it or put it into recycling. The last one I had to think about, it said flex your flex benefits. And that really meant just work from home when you can. That way you're not driving anywhere and you're not producing the same amount of paper waste that usually happens. So don't give up hope. Things are dire and they can get worse if we don't make some changes. But it's so good to hear what all the provinces and other organizations are doing to reduce our carbon footprint and keep this earth as healthy as it can be. Because after all, we are stewards of this planet. And it's not like we have another one sitting in the background if we mess this one up. Back to you, Margaret.
Thank you, Denise. That was amazing and a lot of food for thought there. Yeah. So what can we do? We need to pay attention to what we're doing. At this point, I'm going to, first of all, thank all of our presenters from all across the nation. Judy Page Jones was from Quebec. We have Elizabeth Young from Newfoundland and Labrador, Carol McFadden from Prince Edward Island, Jacqueline Melvin and Eleanor Lilly from Nova Scotia, Angela Scott from New Brunswick, Linda Zellum from Ontario, Karen Gerwing from Saskatchewan, Linda Mason from Alberta, Colleen Hooper from British Columbia. We have our own Lynn McLean from Nova Scotia, Denise Joss from Manitoba. So we've actually had people from across our nation in our presentation today. So we have a little bit of time, so we're going to open up the floor to discussion. So if you'd like to, I'm just going to change the view here so I can see the whole gallery here. Are there any okay, Sandy.
Hello.
Sandy. Hi, Sandy.
Hi. Yes, it says Sandy on Quitson land. I come to you from the Cowichan Valley, home of the Quitson people on Vancouver Island. Thanks so much, everybody, for all your research and hard work. So much information here. I would encourage all of you, this is the 125th year of the Women's Institute in Canada. And one of the challenges that we have put out in the Somnos Women's Institute is to come up with 125 ways to reduce food waste. Now, if any of you have read Drawdown, Paul Hawkins' book Drawdown, I encourage you to look at it again, because food waste is the third highest creator of greenhouse gas emissions, primarily methane, which is 80% more, or pardon me, 80 times more harmful as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, for instance.
This is a WI thing.
So the methane emissions are something we really want to deal with when it comes to food waste. So I challenge lots of you, all of you, to go back to your branches and research and talk about food waste and how you can prevent it. And when I'm done collating all those from the Somenos Women's Institute in the Cowichan Valley, I would be happy to share that with the Federated Women's Institute.
Thank you, Sandy. We'd be really pleased to accept that. I think we have Linda Mason is next with her hand up.
Yeah, and we've already talked about the food waste, and it's great that Sandy is going to share with us. That's wonderful. I just wanted to make a quick comment on the oceans, the presentation that Denise gave. I was watching a TV program last night on the green turtles in the Great Barrier Reef, and they are increasing. They were becoming extinct, and they are now increasing, and they just found one more coral reef that these turtles are going into. So there are 8 other coral reefs. I just wanted to add that. I really enjoy watching programs like that, and it was great listening to your presentation. Thanks, Denise.
Thanks, Linda. I think Micheline has her hand up. You're on mute, Micheline, if you would like to unmute yourself. There we go.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm cooking in the kitchen and I had to sort of change my shirt. Sorry.
It's okay.
I have been so impressed with the knowledge of the leadership across the country, and I wanted to just congratulate everybody for such a grasp of what they're dealing with. And I thought saving lives is a noble cause, and one way, simple way, would be to have a moratorium on allowing any development in areas that we already know are prone to disaster. But developers keep building in these areas, and we can't go in the past and change what happened, but we know now not to do it, but they continue to do it. So I think we should rally around having such a thing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Micheline. So that's a good topic that we can open up for discussion, and appreciate that. So is there anybody else that wants to comment? How about your carbon footprints? Denise, you've got your hand up. Sorry.
I just want to make a comment for Micheline and anyone else who's listening. That was the kinds of choices that were made when there was the great flood in Grand Forks a few years ago. There were certain areas that they just forbid people from building on. And a lot of that was down close by the river, because it's a constant cycle, especially up here in Manitoba too. We get the Red River flooding quite a few times, and we've had some disastrous years. And that's why we have the great big Duff's Ditch that's called the floodway all around to try save us from having some of these horrific flooding occur again. So there are some great strides being made to eliminate those kinds of situations, but probably not enough. And being that I'm collecting resolutions, I think that sometimes maybe some resolutions on those type of issues may be important, and we can always look at them. If we take a cross Canada approach, maybe we can get more done. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you, Denise. I have Karen that has her hand up, and then I'll come to Colleen. Karen from Saskatchewan.
Okay, I'm trying to get my video back on here.
Okay.
I'll show you the picture that Australia in the grocery store, they were selling bags of carrots under the crazy carrots that dream of being tasted, not wasted, perfect for juicing. And they were all the odd-shaped and broken carrots and things like that. So I don't know if you've got any of them in your stores anywhere. I haven't seen them before in Saskatchewan, but I thought that was a neat thing. And I saw these crazy carrots.
Okay, thanks, Karen. One other thing that's talking about reusable grocery bags. There is some at the homestead. There are for sale. It's FWIC. They were donated by Karen and from Manitoba. Sorry, my memory is slipping. But there's several of the grocery bags that you can fold up into a little package. So take a look on our website, and you can find those. So that's another way of helping to support WI, but also helping to save the planet. Michelin, did you have anything else? Your hand is up. Just forgot to take it down.
Oh, that's right. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. And was it Colleen? Did you have something else you wanted to say?
Yes, I was going to say about the flooding that happened. Of course, took out a lot of farm animals, and I know it was like 200,000 chickens were lost, and cows were lost, and it causes huge problems for the store shelves. And also what is that a lot of the land that is farmland is being built on, and I'm built at an incredible rate in BC. I don't know about other provinces, but it's built on absolutely everywhere. And it's unfortunate that I do understand that it's up to the mayors of the town whether they allow building to go on this farmland. So if you get a mayor in that says, oh, well, yes, we're going to build on the farmland, before you can get him back out again, he's put down a lot of housing, and then that footprint can never be brought back, right? Because it's already got into housing, and it's no longer going to be farmed. And we're all going to really regret these decisions to not have farmland.
Okay, thank you, Colleen. Is there anybody else that has a comment? We have a few comments in the chat room. I'm going to go back up here. Good information. Thanks, everyone. So that is from Brenda Duvall. She has to leave, but she's looking forward to seeing the video on our FWIC channel. Elinda Zellum had sent a post here, foodgrainsbank.ca for anyone interested. Betty Guzda from Lincoln, Niagara. Lots of important information there. Valerie Smith, great to hear all the climate change plans in the provinces and not just the resulting problems. Thanks. Hanya, very, very informative. Lynn has the recording of tonight's roundtable will be posted on YouTube. You can find them on the FWIC WI Canada channel and look for the FWIC logo. Eleanor Lilly, such diverse information from across our lands. Thanks to all the presenters for their time and research put into their presentations. And Linda Zellum says, good night, everyone. Safe travels this week. Thanks, Colleen. From Diane, I will keep wearing my 20-year-old outfits. I have a few of those too. Unfortunately, I can't fit into them. But I always keep them in the hopes. And Michelin, several great topics for resolutions. Awesome. Oh, Marie, I'm sorry. I didn't see your hand up there.
No problem. No problem. It was interesting to hear all the comments. I just want to thank everybody for the wonderful presentations tonight and the diversity of what is happening all across our nation is very encouraging and inspiring, but it also is challenging in the fact that we've got to continue to do more. The Sustainable Development Goals, one of them, number 13, is about climate change. And it urges actions to combat climate change and its impacts. Our climate has always been changing, But over the past 200 years, the challenges have become more extreme because of human activities. Climate change is now affecting every country on every continent, and the poorest and the most vulnerable people are the worst affected. And I think one of the ways that we can help to do that is education. And tonight has certainly been a great example of that, to educate us all on what's happening across our own nation and beyond. And I thank you for that. Goal 13 is about finding solutions like renewable energy and clean technology to combat climate change. It will take actions from governments, private sector, and civil society to make significant impact. And it urgently encourages educating people and raising the awareness of climate change in schools and through community outreach projects. And I think that's what you're doing tonight, is raising that awareness through the Women's Institute organization. And I'm so glad to hear, Margaret and Lynn and all the board members, that this is going to go on the website and be able to, on YouTube, be seen by so many and have a tremendous impact. The information tonight was excellent, and everyone did such a great presentation. I just want to thank you all for what you're doing. And I absolutely loved the 10 ways to reduce our carbon footprint. And I think that's something that we all can pass on to many people in our local branches, as a challenge to our own families, our grandchildren. But those simple, what seems like simple little steps, can make a huge impact when we all do it together. So thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Thank you, Marie, and thank you for all that you do. It's important, and it's really important that we hear from you as well. So thank you. Any other people that have comments or questions or ideas? Just going to switch screens here, just make sure I'm not missing somebody. No? Well, it is almost 10 o'clock on the East Coast. So if you have no other comments or questions, I want to thank everybody for all of their hard work. I want to thank Lynn. She spent a lot of time putting the slides together, and she did a great job, as well as all of the presenters. So thank you very much for your participation, and let's see what we can do to save our planet and give our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, a place to live in safety. Nothing else, I'm going to wish everybody safe travels. If you're having to leave to go somewhere else, or have sweet dreams. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.